when I started investing, I was all over the board, and I didn't have an appreciation for it once I was in it. And which is, people get skin in the game. We all kind of do it. And once we're in it and then we start studying it more, you're like, oh my goodness, like this is way beyond what I ever thought. So I would love for you to unpack, like, once that moment was hitting you, some of those orange pills, red pills, whatever you want to call them, whatever people want to call them, were you just going down the rabbit hole at that point, kind of like studying everything you could? What was that like for you as things kind of clicked and you realized, well, this is much more than I initially thought?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a combination of studying and then events, right? So like when I came into Bitcoin and sort of understood the fundamentals, and I spent certainly, I would say probably 2 years, even full-time at Bitwise, really digging into the fundamentals before it really clicked, before it anchored in the deepest part of my brain. And once it does, it sort of all makes sense in a holistic sense. But then you start to ask yourselves, well, how far could this go? And the way that worked for me is people would say things that were very, very far off, like it will be the only currency in the world. Or people would say things that were further off, like governments will adopt it as a reserve asset, or it will be used for international transactions, or it will be used for daily transactions, or it will just be digital gold. And maybe that's sort of the cascade of potential uses, right? Before you get to a full financial system built on Bitcoin rails. And sort of what's happened to me over the years is when I first came in, what made sense to me was digital gold, a new way to store wealth without relying on a government or a bank in this perfect, unhackable system that I could carry around in my mind. Amazing, transformative, multi-trillion-dollar use case. And then I was like, yeah, these other things, maybe they'll happen. But what happened to me, the sort of the orange pilling moment, was when you say that, you say to yourself, well, what would need to happen for these things to happen, right? And maybe it's you need regulatory developments like I don't know, like a Bitcoin ETF is a condition before we get to this next stage. Or maybe you need governments to start owning Bitcoin, or maybe you need regulations that put Bitcoin on a firm setting, or maybe you need institutions to buy Bitcoin, or maybe you need pension funds to buy Bitcoin. Maybe you need it broadly accepted. Maybe you need a broader liquidity market that brings down spreads and means it really is transferable anywhere around the world, 24/7, 365 in size, because liquidity is central to how sort of core assets in financial markets work. And what I watched is us getting all of these things, which I initially weighted as unlikely, right? Like unlikely that the US government would have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. A year ago, that was unlikely. I'm not just saying that. Polymarket said it was unlikely, right? Like it was unlikely. And as these sort of doors knock down, you start thinking, well, like, actually, how far can this go, right? And that's been my conviction, is sort of, I had a core thesis and I thought everything else was like unlikely unless we got these events. And we just keep getting those events. And at some point you're like, wow, that is a lot of events. And it gets to be pretty exciting. And that's continued to be what I see, right? We continue, maybe I'll share this other story. I talk to people all the time in traditional finance, year after year after year, about Bitcoin. I go to these conferences and I give speeches. And it's incredible to me because since I've been giving those speeches, Bitcoin's up about 12 or 13x. And anyone who listened to me originally has done well, which is great. But there are plenty of people who have come to these speeches every year for 7 or 8 years and have never bought Bitcoin. And at the last one, I sat down with this guy and I was like, what would it take? Like, write down the event that it would take to convince you that this thing is not going to zero and that you should have some. Because if it was, that we needed ETFs, we got that. That they would need to be successful, we got that. That institutions would own it, we got that. Pensions, that governments, what is it? And he thought about it. He couldn't think of anything else. And so he went off and bought Bitcoin. And I share that because it just keeps knocking down these barriers, right? Which is pretty incredible and makes you think, this thing really has legs.
Yeah, that's a great story. It makes me think of too, and just a bunch of the things we've been talking about, where again, my journey 15 years ago, leaving school, was, Mike Maloney, Robert Kiyosaki, really studying money, gold and silver. And I think Mike had started like in 2008, maybe, tracking the death of the dollar. and they stopped in like 2018 because there were so many nails in that coffin that he couldn't even keep up with it anymore. Because it just like you had said something earlier, it made me think of it. There was like a slow trickle, and then it just eventually became more and more and more. But your point, what you were saying again, like the markets can be irrational much longer than any of us can stay solvent, really on either end of the spectrum. So they can be irrational on either end. And here we are. I mean, it's still 15 years later, and it's all these signposts along the way on the freeway saying, hey, exit now, or something crazy ahead. And here we are, we're still going. So to your point again earlier, this thing can go run much longer, the existing system, the fiat system we're in. So that's why I think it's important for the average person to understand. And it's tough to live in both worlds. You have to live in both this digital space and the old legacy fiat space. You just have to. And that's the world we are in. That's what makes it tough for so many people, which is wild. What are some of the of Bitwise, what you guys are working on now? What are some big goals, initiatives that you guys are working on now, as we really, I guess, already the last half of 2025, which is wild to even think about. But what are you guys kind of working on? What are some of your big initiatives and goals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number one thing we do every day is go out and talk to people about Bitcoin and about crypto. So we do something like 15,000 meetings a year with financial professionals. We're at hundreds of conferences every year, and we're continuing to open up these platforms to access Bitcoin. That's really Bitwise's role in the world, I think, is to educate people about this incredible market opportunity. We have the advantage of sort of straddling crypto and TradFi, so we can communicate in both worlds, and that's probably the number one priority. Beyond that, we're an asset manager, so we continue to develop new and novel products, giving exposure to things like broad-based crypto assets. We hope to turn our index-based products into an ETF later this year. We have a number of income-based strategies. And probably the last thing we're working on, we're doing a lot of work on how to generate income off of large Bitcoin positions. We hear that from institutional and large retail investors alike, that they have a large Bitcoin position that they don't want to sell. And what can they do to generate, to your point about living in both worlds, what can they do to generate a handful of percent return a year to pay their mortgage and college tuitions for their kids, while still holding on to their Bitcoin upside? So there's not super easy answers there, but there are answers there. And that's something that we're spending a lot of time on, because increasingly there are people with large positions in Bitcoin that want to maintain those positions. They don't want to sell their Bitcoin, but they do need to live in this fiat-based world. And so we're working on generating income for those customers as well.
How do you guys in the financialization, which again we've been kind of touching on and going back and forth on the whole talk, and it's an important part of the growth of the system, obviously, and tapping into whether it's liquidity pools and just things that are kind of sitting there and they say, hey, I want a part of this, and they just couldn't before or whatever. And to me, the marriage between that and also self-custody, for instance, and that being one of the huge things that really orange pilled me, and just realizing it, because it put a stark contrast between that and every other asset, where it was, wow, I really don't own any of these things. Even your own home, you might live in it, but if some guys show up and knock on your door and you're not paying your property taxes, well, you'll find out really quick. How are you guys handling that going forward? That real innovation of self-custody, what kind of plans do you guys have for that? Anything you can disclose, or just, moving forward as this space kind of evolves and goes down more that road?
Yeah, I'd love to say, three things about that. First, as I mentioned, when you asked me what I want to see in the bill, this is the fundamental thing, right? This is at the core of Bitcoin. We love people who self-custody. Obviously, there's some irony in the fact that I run an ETF, which is almost the other side of that. But we recognize that this is the core of what Bitcoin is, and we love the people to do it. The second thing that I note, just towards that ETF thing, people in Bitcoin sometimes ask me, how do you sleep at night doing this? And I point out the example from the gold ETF launch, which is a fun example for you. So it's the closest analogy to a Bitcoin ETF. The gold ETF launched in 2004. And they did a study of the number of owners of physical gold before and after the Bitcoin launch, or the gold ETF launch. And what it showed is the gold ETF launched, and it pulled in a huge amount of assets, right? The same way Bitcoin ETFs have, because people love ETFs. But actually, the number of people who own who owned gold bars and coins rose dramatically as well. And I think that's going to happen in Bitcoin as well. And the idea there is, if you're a traditional investor, you've never touched Bitcoin before, it's easier to buy Bitcoin in an ETF in your Schwab account. But as you mentioned earlier, it's sort of like invest and then investigate. Once you own a little bit, you get to know more about Bitcoin. And many of those people will want to self-custody themselves as well. So, maybe Trojan horse, I don't want to use that to refer to my ETF. But I do think it's like an on-ramp to the broader Bitcoin system. In terms of what we're doing, we think about it all the time. From the ETF perspective, I would love to get to the point where we could do in-kind redemptions, which would let people take physical delivery of their Bitcoin. We're a long way from that. That's not SEC approved. There's no format for that, but it's something that I would love to eventually do. We do SMAs for customers where we help them hold their own coins in a qualified custodian where they have the right to them. Bitwise doesn't, but maybe we manage that exposure for you. So we're trying to always get our customers closer and closer to that. Well, at the same time, recognizing that for many people, ease of use is a huge win. And having some Bitcoin is better than not having some Bitcoin, and the ETFs at least serve that purpose.
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, then check that out over here. Come on, do it. I'll see you in there.